had such limited movements. So it's been devastating, but we have a great opportunity to get back in the air. And we would urge President Biden and Prime Minister Johnson to seize the initiative this week. We can set the pace for international travel. You know, two countries, low prevalence of infection, high vaccination rates, low risk. We've got to go for it.
So I'm going to come now to Scott, if I may. That is actually Scott Kirby. He's not Dragan Dragojevic. Scott, excuse me, Scott. I'd like to build on what Ed was talking about in terms of the question of safety and consumer confidence. Because if you look at the domestic market in the United States over the last few months, it's been incredibly strong. So what does this tell you about the consumer's willingness and confidence that traveling is safe and the air travel experience is safe? You may want to talk a little bit about what you guys have done to make that a reality. But just give us a sense of your feeling about the implications of the domestic market on international travel.
Sure, thanks, Duncan. And we're all confident on the safety of air travel. Aviation was the leading industry, I think, in responding to COVID and putting in protocols to make it safe around the world. Ed talked about the 1 in a million chance if you fly from the UK to the US. But early in the crisis, the cleaning protocols on airlines, the first major industry to require masks on board. And importantly, you know, the study about air filtration on board airplanes is what gives us so much confidence in flying and in aviation. The study that we partnered on with the Department of Defense here in the United States essentially said that flying on an airplane is the equivalent, because of the airflow on the airplane, is the equivalent of being 15 feet away from someone in a building, even if you're sitting right next to them. Here in the United States, as we've opened up, we've seen an incredible resurgence of leisure travel to start, followed by the beginnings of business travel. And we've been able to do so safely. We can do so safely in the US-UK corridor. That can be a template that we can use around the rest of the world as vaccinations go up in other places and case rates come down. But it's also important, the psychological recovery. We've talked about the economic recovery here and how critical that is. But the ability to get back and connect with people and start reuniting the world in a world with geopolitical tensions around the globe and all the tensions that we have in society, getting out with other people, learning other cultures, seeing other people is a critical part of connecting the world. And that's what all of us on this call do, are about connecting the world. And that is working successfully here in the United States. And given the similarity of case rates and vaccinations between the US and UK, we absolutely can do the same thing safely. And as Sean said, it's time to do it.
Scott, just to follow up on that, are there any issues that are specific to international travel that are different to the domestic market in terms of the passenger experience and safety, or it doesn't seem to me that there are, but are there any issues that we should be concerned about?
Well, the one issue that'll be different, I suspect, is, and we're all on board on this call with it, is requiring either testing or vaccinations. And we've all been working on the technology to demonstrate safely that you've been vaccinated with a requirement for vaccinations. And the fact is, actually, the first international test of using testing was Newark to Heathrow, which United worked on with the Heathrow Airport back in November of last year to demonstrate we could do that on an international basis. And while those requirements are not here domestically, we're all prepared to implement those, and we've all been testing them and can do so safely in the international environment as well.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that actually, because there's also the question of what happens at the border, and I'll ask John to talk about that in a moment. But first, I'd like to bring in Robin Hayes of JetBlue. So you've also had a busy few months in terms of the domestic market, which has been incredibly strong. What have your customers been saying as they've been using your service?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I think in the US now, we've seen the same for 2 or 3 months. People are getting vaccinated, and one of the first things they want to do is travel. And we've demonstrated that they can do so safely. You've heard from all my colleagues here today how much this industry has done to keep it safe. And as the domestic markets opened up, some international markets have opened up. The testing protocols are working. Airplanes are full. COVID case rates are still coming down. So there is plenty of data out there to show that we can open up the UK and US air corridor very safely. We've talked a lot about the toll on businesses and the economy, but the human cost is just, I think, devastating. You've got people who have been vaccinated. They haven't seen their kids, their grandkids for over a year now. And at some point, I've been vaccinated, I've been shielding, I've done everything I've been asked to do. I still don't understand why I can't get on an airplane and travel. The UK and US have led the world in their vaccine program, and now is the time for the citizens of those two countries to benefit from that with the options of travel.
Yes, and John, picking up on that, can you just expand a little bit on why the US should be on the UK's green list and why the US should be confident that the UK is a safe place for its citizens to travel to? And maybe you could also just address this question about what happens at the border. And I think there's sometimes some confusion about the responsibility for what happens in the airport and then what happens at the border. So how ready is the UK government to deal with increased travel?
Great, thank you, Duncan. Well, first of all, with COVID, we know that we're going to be living with it for a long time, and that we need to take a risk-based approach to it in our normal lives, domestically, and with travel as well. There is no zero-risk way of living a life with COVID. And that's why the kind of risk-based approach the UK government's taken is a very sensible one, to say, if you've got a country with low risk of COVID transmission, with low risk of variant of concern, high vaccination levels, then that can be considered to be low risk, equivalent to going about your normal business at home. But other countries clearly have much higher risks, and we need tighter controls for people coming from those countries. But the US is the epitome of a low-risk country. We've got higher levels of vaccination even than in the UK. These are the poster children of good vaccination programs. We've got low levels of variants of concern, and the UK government has tested that themselves. And we've got COVID levels at a low level and coming down in the United States. And that shows that vaccination is working. There needs to be a prize for that, both for the countries that have taken the lead in vaccination, but also to show other countries that there's a benefit to getting on with their own vaccination programs to open up their economy. And I think at the G7, both the US and the UK can take a global lead in saying, this is the prize for getting vaccination levels up. You can get back to business as usual. And that's why opening up is so important. Now, in terms of the border, there are checks that have to take place for passengers coming from many countries. We would hope that for vaccinated passengers from the United States, they won't need to take all the tests that currently are required for some other countries. But the journey through Heathrow should be straightforward. US passengers with a US passport can use the electronic gates. That will make a very quick journey through the airport. And the Border Force are upgrading their systems so that US passengers who fill out their forms can just use the e-gates as they normally would. And that should make it a really simple world-class experience for them. But we've also recently opened a dedicated facility for passengers coming in from the higher risk countries. So there's no concerns about mingling that people might have had previously because we're segregating passengers coming in from high risk countries. So we're ready to go, and would really warmly welcome seeing our American friends coming back.
Thank you. I had a colleague of mine actually went through yesterday after having been here for a long time. He said the experience was actually pretty painless getting into the UK. So we have a question from Tariro Muzazewa from the New York Times. And I'm going to ask Doug if you would address this. So Tariro says, I'm curious what you all expect the admissions rules to be when the US-UK travel reopens both ways. The US seems pretty clearly not going to require vaccination, but will it be a vaccine or a test or either or? Just would like to get a sense of what you're hearing on that front. Doug, can you address that question?
Sure, and Scott already referenced this, but we're prepared to either vaccinations or testing or both. And in order to get this started, as Jonathan just articulately said, is really important. So while vaccinations aren't required in the United States, that doesn't mean vaccinations won't be required to travel between the United States and UK through this corridor. And we're certainly prepared for that. Again, it's a decision to be made by the countries themselves, but we certainly think that's prudent to get us started. So we would certainly anticipate that, and if a second level, including testing, is deemed necessary, we can handle that too. But vaccinations for certain. I can't speak for everybody on the line, but I think I believe we're all prepared, as Scott said, to start this up with vaccinations required on both sides.
Thank you. And Sean, can you talk a little bit about what British Airways has done in terms of thinking about if proof of vaccination or proof of testing is required and the volumes of passengers return to something close to normal, how you would deal with that in terms of the check-in process using technology? I know there's been a number of tests being done with different and there's the whole world of different technological solutions being proposed. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Duncan, I think we've got a number of solutions we're working with. We're using Verifly at the minute, and we've got our own Right to Fly app, which is embedded in BA.com. And basically what you can do is upload your proof of documentation before you travel, and we will verify that and give you a green to go before you get to the airport. And I think the industry is all trialing similar solutions. And IATA, of course, are building out a more comprehensive solution, which is in trial. So I think the ability to verify either a vaccine or a test is up and running and ready, and we're deploying it at scale at the minute, and customers are using it, and it's pretty effective in putting customers through airports in a seamless way.
Yes, and we have a question on this topic, which Ed, maybe I could address to you, because I know you are flying passengers to places which allows doubly vaccinated people in Europe and elsewhere. So the question from Tom Parmenter from Sky News: should passengers who have been fully vaccinated be given an easier path to travel than those who haven't? And if so, what should that path look like? I mean, it's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is an interesting question. And again, I think this is something we should leave to the science and to the experts. We're not medical experts, we're airline experts. And what our medical experts have said is that if you are vaccinated, you should be free to be able to travel to any country that will take you in without a quarantine, without a testing requirement. If you're not vaccinated, you can fulfill the same type of care with a test. In the US, as we have massively mobilized US travel in the last 60 to 90 days, our planes are full. We're not requiring vaccinations, we're not requiring tests, and we have no knowledge, at least to my knowledge, of any kind of transmission of COVID going on. In fact, anything, the rates just continue to come down and down and down. We are going to open up the world. It's going to happen. And this is the corridor to get started, because the sooner we can start here, the sooner we can start in those other countries.
Here. Talking about reopening, Robin, I'm going to come to you because you're planning to launch a service to the UK, which I'm sure your colleagues on the call are thrilled about. A new service from August to Heathrow. So given the fact that there are currently restrictions in place, I mean, can you talk about kind of the broader issues of competition and choice on this route?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I think the fact that we are all here means we all love competing. We all do it in a slightly different way. We all have different advantages and disadvantages to bring our customers. I think what everyone is just saying on this call is, we just want to crack at it again. We think we can. We know we can operate safely. We've been doing it for months in the US, in the domestic market. We've been doing it for months in the US, in the Caribbean, and some of the Latin America markets. And when we look to the UK, they have done an outstanding job with the vaccine program. So we just want to get back to a world where people can have a choice of airlines to fly, and let the customer choose. And of course, I'm very happy that JetBlue will be one of those. But this is much bigger than JetBlue. I mean, this is an industry issue. This is an issue of getting families and people connected again, and we can do it safely and we can do it quickly.
So, Roger, can I come to you from a sort of broader kind of travel industry perspective and give us a sense of the impact on the US economy, particularly around, I guess, employment issues? Of the ongoing closure of the US-UK route?
Certainly, when you look at it, this is a crisis in three prongs. Obviously, a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a personal crisis, as everyone said. We work with all my colleagues that are on the call today, but also with the hotels, with the attractions, with the destination. And 83% of all travel business is small business, and we've got to remember that. And we can't just look at the economic impact on travel, but all the things that happen because of travel is so important. Put it in perspective on jobs. In the first 2 months, half the travel industry was out of work. Still today, 65% of all the unemployment in the U.S. comes from the travel industry. And unless we get business travel and international travel back, that represents 41% of all the economics and a third of the jobs. So that's why it has to come back. And I think, as Ed said so well, we've had 2 million people a day flying. Domestic is strong in the U.S. and with no reported problems that we know of. So with the belt and suspenders of testing and vaccination, I think this time is right to really begin looking at opening this up. We've got to put people back to work and get the economy moving again.
So thank you, Roger, for that. And I think one of the issues that I think government confuses, and particularly for us, we're obviously a business organization focused on the business market rather than the leisure market. But I think we get a sense that the government thinks, hey, business is doing fine. They've got, they're doing Zoom calls, they're talking to each other across the Atlantic. But the one sector that definitely is not doing fine is the small and medium-sized enterprises, because SMEs, the managing director is also the sales director, is also the HR director, is the new business director. And, we hear time and time again of SMEs that just cannot see their business, see their customers in the other market. So they've basically gone into hibernation. And it's just another difficult area for small and medium-sized enterprises to have to deal with. But changing tack, we have a couple of questions about how quickly the market could reopen. Mary Schlangenstein from Bloomberg and someone, John Guest, on the chat. Once the governments, and Scott, maybe I could ask you to talk about this. So once the governments agree to convene a summit on reopening transatlantic travel, or if they agree to reopen, what's a realistic timeline for when flights could resume? Because presumably you can't just do that the next day.
Well, we probably all have similar timelines, but we could be back flying. We already are flying, but we could add pretty significant capacity in I would say a 4-week time period. And what we've seen is there's huge demand. Normally, we would never try to fly across the Atlantic with a 4-week window to take bookings. But in this case, it's important to just reestablish those links. It's important for confidence. It's important for the recovery. And so we would certainly try to do that on relatively short order, and there's probably reasonable demand. But the bigger point I would make is we are in the peak travel season for travel between the US and UK. And every single day that goes by is a day lost for the recovery. So sooner the better at the G7, hopefully at the latest.
Yes. Well, that's encouraging. We have a question from ITV News, and maybe I'll ask Shai to address this. how can you ensure travel between the UK and the US will be safe? Surely there is a long way to go before a travel corridor between the UK and US can be considered safe. Are vaccination rates really where they need to be to allow travel? That is not from me, that is from ITV News.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think I'm going to slightly take the line that Ed started with. First of all, we become all professional in looking at all the data and the facts, and this is going to be a data-driven approach. The government here in the UK set up a number of tests, and those tests, when you look at the US, has been met. Vaccination rates, the level of prevalence of the disease, of variants of concern, and of course, the level of impact on the hospital systems. Both the UK and the US meet those standards. And I would say when you add the 1 in a million across, contracting the virus on a plane, and you talk about the border measures, I think we are ripe for opening up this market. And, here in Europe and in the UK, we're forgetting that in the US, they're back to almost 100% capacity in a market which is far larger than a domestic market that does not exist here in the UK. So if we look at that as the way forward, we understand that it can be done safely, which of course is the number one priority for any CEO, any organization in our aviation industry. But I also say that if you look at the demand from the US, the minute the Europeans opened up the markets, demand is now 50% of where it was 2019. The UK is still lagging behind at 15%. So consumers, businesses respond very quickly to signals coming in out of governments. And the G7, as others have said, of course, is the opportunity. And the ask is very clear. The science and the data backs the US moving to green here in the UK. And on the US side, repeal the 212F, which has anomalies in it. And I would say no later than, as Doug said, no later than the G7, but no later than Freedom Day, July the 4th.
Yeah, certainly when you look at the 212F list, in light of today's data, it looks extremely odd. That it's almost a list of the countries with the most advanced rates of vaccination, rather than the ones with the least advanced rates of vaccination. And it may well have been right, 15 months ago, but it really does look very strange today. So we have a question. It's a fairly direct question. I'm gonna put it to John Holland-Kaye. Do you think that this is from Neil Lansfield from the Press Association? Do you think the UK government is basing its travel policies on politics rather than data?
I certainly think the government is being cautious in the build-up to the 21st of June, which is the date is set for opening up again. And I think we can all take some assurance that they are being so cautious. But we have to open up at some point. And we have a very good basis for doing that, which is the risk-based approach the government has published. And all we're asking them to do is to follow the guidelines they set themselves. And if you do that, follow the data, that will say that the US of all countries is the safest to open up among the major markets. And this is the right time to do that. And it gives us the dividend of all the hard work that's been made on both sides of the Atlantic on improving vaccination levels. And it will allow businesses to reconnect with one another, help to support trade, help families to reconnect. It's absolutely the right thing to do. And I think that is economically important as well as politically important for both governments to show that there's a prize for taking the lead on vaccination.
Thank you, John. And just a reminder to everybody who's listening, if you would like to ask a question, you can put it in the chat. I'm sorry we don't have the ability for everybody to come on camera and ask your question live, but I will read it out if you ask it. And so Karen Walker, I'm not sure where Karen is from, but in the chat has said, what discussions are actually taking place with the UK and US governments about what proof of vaccination they would require? I don't know if anybody can talk from a US perspective. Doug or Ed, would you pick that one up? What What
thanks,
is the US
Doug.
government saying about the push of vaccination, if anything?
I'll
What
go
are they
ahead.
saying, if anything?
I'll go ahead. I don't. Again, Karen, I'm not sure that we know exactly. Again, we all have established vaccination protocols for ensuring that the traveler is indeed vaccinated. The real point of all this is to get to where we change this focus. As Duncan said, this 212F list doesn't make much sense anymore, and change the focus away from countries themselves and to the traveler themselves. And vaccinated travelers are safe to travel. And if you're not vaccinated and you can pass a test, you're safe. You should be safe to travel. And that's where we need to get. Proving that is something, again, that'll be up to individual countries to decide what they're comfortable with. But we know we can handle whatever they decide. I agree with Ed. We need to be following the science here and let scientists tell us what we need to do. But the science certainly says if you are vaccinated, air travel is safe already. And if you're vaccinated, you're safe to travel between countries.
Doug, if I could add on to that, what we know is, at least our administration in the U.S. is very concerned about continuing the vaccination push in the U.S. to get to herd immunity. And in the U.S., we're at about 65% of eligible adults who are eligible for the vaccine have taken the vaccine. And I know they're looking over the course of the next few weeks, a concerted push to get over the line. One of the reasons why we're having challenges getting over this last 20 to 30% done is what are the incentives for people being vaccinated other than just simply their own welfare? Well, a great incentive is to be able to travel internationally. So one of the things that we should be encouraging is opening up, given the safety of the science, opening up international travel to those who've been vaccinated to give them another reason to be vaccinated.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Look, I'll just pile on that. We have begun to hear in the United States, well, okay, you may not get it done by G7 because we want to see the vaccination rates, which are stubbornly stopping it at somewhere around 60%, get up to 70%, and then we'll do it. I agree with Ed. This would be a good way to help compel that to happen, to give people yet another reason to get vaccinated and get us over that 70% threshold. So we're working with the U.S. government to help them understand that point. They, of course, understand it. But to recognize this really will help with the incentive as opposed to waiting for the number to get there.
Yeah, and this seems to be the approach that the US government has taken with its own citizens. So there are no restrictions on US citizens if you've been vaccinated on returning to the US without quarantine. And it's also the approach that's been taken by some EU countries. So, Spain will allow Americans who have been vaccinated, and other European markets are allowing Americans who've been vaccinated to visit them without quarantine requirements. It's just again, the logic is odd. That for some people, vaccination gives you the right to travel. In others, for some reason, it doesn't. I have a question from the Daily Mail in the UK. David Churchill. Sean, I'm going to ask you to address this. The UK government looks like it's taking a very cautious approach to the resumption of foreign travel, given that Portugal was downgraded to amber and given that several destinations were apparently safe to add to the list but weren't. I think people were talking about Malta and other places. So how realistic is it calling for a travel corridor between the UK and US within this context? It appears as if a lot of the calls made by the travel industry are falling on deaf ears. So what makes you think that this one will be listened to?
Well, I think, Duncan, I'd go back to what the opportunity is, which is a huge, significant boost to our economies, and we'll need that because we're coming out of a pandemic that's taken a huge economic toll. And then consequently, there's a risk if we don't open up that we don't get the economic recovery that we should be benefiting from after the vaccination program. So I think there's much more at stake here than a holiday. It's about trade, it's about visiting friends and relatives, and it's about getting back and doing business and re-employing people. So there's more at stake, and I think the government should look at that on both sides of the Atlantic through that lens. But I think you're right about caution. It has been, I think, frustrating. I think customers and travelers deserve more consistency. It was disappointing the way the Portugal situation was handled. And I think we can make a much better fist of the framework in giving both travelers and the industry a lot more certainty to plan against.
Duncan, Roger Dow, if I can chime in there.
Yes, of course, Roger.
Know that everything is a process. You've got a plan, you've got that 30 days that people were talking about. So what we need is a date specific to shoot for, because if we don't have that, we'll just keep kicking this can down the road. So I think it's very important to come up with this date, and that will push vaccination even more, and it'll push the planning process. So it's important to have that date specific versus just saying start tomorrow.
Well, I completely agree with you. And I think in the UK, everybody thought that they had that date of June 21st when the government had said that all restrictions would be lifted. They didn't explicitly include travel restrictions, but it was, I certainly felt it was implicit in the date of June 21st when that was announced, 4 or 5 months ago. I actually have a flight booked on June the 20th on that basis to the UK, but it doesn't look like I will be able to avoid quarantine. So I think we're in danger unless we're careful of just going over the same ground again. So I'm going to ask each of you if there's anything that we've missed in this conversation that you'd like to say that we haven't covered yet. Sean, is there anything that we've missed?
No, Duncan, I think we've covered the opportunity very well, but I think I just would urge, politicians on both sides to seize the initiative. We've got momentum, we've got a great opportunity. We got to get back up and running, and the North Atlantic would be a huge boost to the industry. So, let's seize the day.
John, what have we missed? Anything?
I think a couple of questions have been about, well, why now when this hasn't happened in the last 15 months? And we've heard a lot about vaccinations being key to that. And that puts us all in a more confident place that as every day goes by, we're more confident vaccinations work against new variants and that they are getting us the control that we need over COVID. But we are at a critical moment. The UK has set the 21st of June for people to get their lives back. The US has set the 4th of July. Well, those are within a few days of one another. And now we have the G7 coming, when both countries want to show global leadership and to show how the world economy can reset itself, how capitalism can be a force for good in the world. And this is the point when they should be showing the benefits of the vaccination programs that they have led in getting business back to work. And that's what reopening the transatlantic corridor will do. So an announcement for the G7 for opening up around the 21st of June to the 4th of July is perfect timing. And if not now, when?
Yeah. Roger, what have we missed? Any additional comments?
It's Roger. We've spoken about the travel economy, but I keep going back to nothing happens in the world until someone gets on a plane. What deals are made, products are sold, and we really have to look at the expansive global economy that is all tied to air travel.
Well, and I think the politicians understand that. Otherwise, the G7 conference would have been conducted on Zoom. But what is frustrating to so many of our members is that the exemptions have been granted for the politicians, but not for the rest of us. Doug, is there anything else that you would like to add that we've missed?
I'll just summarize by saying we're ready. The airlines are all ready. The citizens of both countries are ready. There's enormous pent-up demand for this route to open back up, for international travel to open up, and this is about global leadership. And we would encourage both the U.S. and UK leaders to get this started. We will prove that we can make this work, and we'll prove it to the rest of the world, and our leadership will make a huge difference in economies rebounding around the globe.
Thank you, Doug. Shai, anything to add?
Yeah, all I would say is, first of all, let me just remind us that this is not about aviation. It's just on its own. 1 in 10 jobs in the world are to do with travel and tourism. So this is so much bigger than all of us individually and combined. I think it also is important that we understand that this is not a choice between health or travel. Both can happen simultaneously, with utmost respect for individuals, for the countries, for the efforts that everyone has made over the past year and a half. And for the UK itself, any day that this remains shut down is costing our economy 23 million pounds, putting 500,000 jobs at risk after we've already lost 30,000 jobs in the UK alone in our industry. So this is really about the livelihoods of the people within aviation, but importantly, the people that rely on aviation.
I think we'll be amazed at how quickly things follow once UK, US opens up. People need someone to set the example, and this is the prime opportunity to set the example, and the rest of the world will quickly follow by this example.
Thank you. Robin, did you have a comment to make as a final word?
Yeah, coming off mute. No, that wasn't my final word. Look, I sit here in New York, and there was probably no part of the US more impacted by COVID at the beginning or more cautious about COVID than New York. Now, when you're out in New York, the bars are packed, the restaurants are full, people have got vaccinated. Certainly my morning train is now full, almost full, whereas it wasn't even a few months ago. So people are getting back to their normal lives. And so that's what our customers want. We can do it safely. Case counts in New York continue to come down, even as New York has opened up. And so, I think people just want the same opportunities that everyone else is, seeing as you look around the US. And we can do this safely. We will do it safely. And we look for the governments to take some action so we can get this air corridor going.
Thank you, Robin. And Scott, I'm going to come to you and then to Ed for the final word.
Okay. So I'll just wrap up with what everyone else is saying. This is really about our customers. This is letting families get back together, friends that haven't seen each other, business need to be together. This is about our customers and letting them reconnect, and we can do so safely.
And Ed, you get the final word.
Well, I think we are all in strong unison on this, which is something that's very rare in this industry, to have the leading airlines across the US and the UK speaking with one voice, and hopefully the world will take notice of the importance that we ascribe to not only the safety of our operations, but the importance to the well-being of all Americans and all UK citizens as well, to enable them to be able to visit each other. One other thing I would mention, Duncan, is that as you can see in Europe, a number of countries are opening up to US vacationers. The Southern European countries, the Mediterranean countries, France is opening up. US travelers are making their plans now. If the UK delays much longer, unfortunately, they're going to lose some real opportunity for US travelers, because it's not going to be a viable option on their list, and those decisions are being made as we speak.
I know. My wife booked a flight to Athens from New York yesterday, so not with me, unfortunately, but she's going. So, well, listen, I would just like to say a big thank you to all of you for joining this call today. It's a massively important issue for British American business, the 450 member companies of BAB that are effectively members of BAB because of the transatlantic corridor and the huge value of that corridor in terms of trade in goods, trade in services, and the capital that has been invested both ways across the Atlantic make it the most valuable bilateral corridor in the world. And it seems completely crazy that this is effectively closed at the moment. To everybody in the audience, if you would like a copy of the tape, it will be available to you through the PR contacts at the airlines, and please do get in touch. And just to say thank you all very much for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.